After insisting to my potential boss that talented developers like me don't make mistakes, she didn't hire me, and I think she's sabotaging my job prospects out of pettiness. I was rejected from a role for not answering an interview question. I had all the skills they asked for, and the recruiter and hiring manager loved me. I had a final round of interviews, a peer on the hiring team, a peer from another team that I would work closely with, the director of both teams, so my would-be grand boss, which I thought was weird, and then finally a technical test with the hiring manager I had already spoken to. I don't know if it matters, but I'm male and everyone I interviewed with was female. The interviews went great, except for the grand boss. I asked why she was interviewing me since it was a technical position and she was clearly some kind of middle manager. She told me she had a technical background, although she had been in management for 10 years, so it's not like her experience was even relevant, but that she was interviewing for things like communication, the ability to prioritize, and soft skills. I still thought it was weird to interview with my boss's boss. She asked pretty standard and boring questions, which I aced. But then she asked me to tell her about the biggest mistake I've made in my career and how I handled it. I told her I'm a professional and I don't make mistakes, and she argued with me. She said everyone makes mistakes, but what matters is how you handle them and prevent the same mistake from happening in the future. I told her maybe she made mistakes as a developer, but since I actually went to school for it, I didn't have that problem. She seemed fine with it, and we moved on with the interview. A couple days later, the recruiter emailed me to say they had decided to go with someone else. I asked for feedback on why I wasn't chosen, and she said there were other candidates who were stronger. I wrote back and asked if the grandma had been the reason I didn't get the job, and she just told me again that the hiring panel made the decision to hire someone else. I looked the grandma up on LinkedIn after the rejection, and she was a developer at 2 industry leaders and then an executive at a third. She was also connected to a number of well-known C-level people in our city and industry. I'm thinking of mailing her on LinkedIn to explain why her question was wrong and asking if she'll consider me for future positions at her company, but my wife says it's a bad idea. What do you think about me mailing her to try to explain? Update 1. Thank you for answering my question. I read some of the comments, but I don't think people really understood my point of view. I'm very methodical and analytic, which is why I said I don't make mistakes. It's just not normal to me for people to think making mistakes is okay. I did follow your advice to not mail the grandma on LinkedIn, until I discovered she seems to have gotten me blackballed in our field. Despite numerous resume submissions and excellent phone screens, I have been unable to secure employment. I know my resume and cover letter are great, I followed your advice, and during the phone screens, the interviewer always really likes me, so it's obvious she's told all her friends about me, and I'm being blackballed. I did email her on LinkedIn after I realized what she'd done, and while she was polite in her response, she refused to admit she'd told everyone my name. She suggested that it's just a tough job market and there are a lot of really qualified developers looking for jobs. She mentioned layoffs at places like Twitter and Facebook, but it just seems too much of a coincidence that as soon as she refused to hire me, no one else wanted to hire me either. I also messaged the hiring manager on LinkedIn to ask her to tell her boss to stop talking about me, but I didn't receive a response. I'm considering mailing some of her connections on LinkedIn to find out what she's saying about me, but I don't know if it would do any good. I'm very frustrated by this whole thing. I understand that she didn't like me, but I don't think it's fair to get me blackballed everywhere. I've been talking to my wife about going back to school for my master's instead of working, but she's worried it will be a waste of money and won't make me any more employable. I've explained that having a master's degree in technology is desirable and will make me a more attractive candidate, but she's not convinced. If you have any advice on how to explain to her why it's a good idea, I would be grateful.